My wife made me wear a tie. No, I actually joined in 2003, and I was my predecessor, John Hoy's first recruit. I arrived something like 3 months after he arrived. And so I've served as finance director here from 2003 through to the end of last year as part of, I think, a relatively successful and stable team. And I was delighted to be offered the opportunity to step into his fairly sizable shoes in January this year. Prior to that, I trained as a chartered accountant with KPMG up in Liverpool. I then specialised in corporate finance and worked with 2 different investment banks from 97 to about 2003. And the highlights of that time included deals to help Bob the Builder buy Barney the Purple Dinosaur and Thomas the Tank Engine. So these were happy times, but I think my children had reached an age and I'd reached a point where I really wanted to set down roots closer to home. So the Blenheim Palace opportunity, which is so synonymous with all that's great about Oxford, was the perfect place for me to land, and I've been very happy here. Big, expansive plans. I mean, the first thing I always stress is the period that John and I were working together here was enormously successful. So while we are changing many things, that's in no way a disavowal of the past. It's more a reflection that John built such a strong set of businesses here that we could actually take on bigger and better goals. So we thought long and hard about what a landed estate could really be. When you say the words landed estate and you speak of aristocracy, then we think of old eras gone by, and the idea is something that's lost in time. It's a bit out of place. And you ask yourself, would you invent a landed estate today if it didn't already exist? And we reflected a lot on that, and I think we reached the conclusion that landed estates were actually pretty unique things. We combine elements of commercial enterprise with elements of public sector, with elements of charity. So as a commercial enterprise, we can deploy capital for profit, and let's make no mistake, we are here to do that. We're a profit-making entity. But at the same time, like many public sector bodies and local government, we are completely grounded in this area. There's no future for Blenheim where we decide that this old building here is very expensive to heat and maintain. We're going to move to a new build in Wiltshire. That can't happen. And we own so much of this area, and we have so many people in the community who work for us, we could never walk away. So that, if you combine those 2 elements, that gives us the almost unique ability to invest into this local area, knowing that we can wait for the very long term for the returns. And as a charity, with the support of the Duke and trustees, we can support purely charitable objectives, we can hand over money for good causes, and I'm delighted to say we've established a practice of doing that in significant sums. But again, these things still come back to the same idea. It's all the different ways in which we can enhance this area and make life better here. So having reflected on that uniqueness, we decided we were happy in our own skin. We were comfortable doing what we could do, and we set out a bold vision to be the lifeblood of the local economy, to enhance the lives of local people, and to share and protect this extraordinary place. And we translate those big words into 10 very specific goals, which explain to the world, well, what do we mean by enhancing the local economy or improving the lives of local people? And those goals start with, and these are all 10-year goals, and we've put out clear numbered measurements against them. So the first goal is to triple our contribution to the local economy over 10 years, independently measured, and we're just in the process of measuring our first year now. The second goal is to train more than 100 apprentices over 10 years in a uniquely broad range of crafts, and we've already started that, and our first apprentices include apprentices in shepherding as well as apprentices in marketing, and I think there's something wonderful in that breadth. The third goal, and this one will be very, very big indeed, is to house more than 300 families in inspirationally good and truly affordable accommodation. We think the accommodation market is incredibly expensive in Oxfordshire, and even affordable accommodation simply isn't. We're determined to completely transform that landscape, and we have exciting plans to announce there. Our fourth goal is to build up the business, which is our lifeblood. It gives us the funds to fund training and everything else. That's our visitor attraction business. And we intend to grow that to 750,000 paying visitors, which will mean more than likely about 1.2 million total visitors in a year over the next 10 years. Moving away from that business, we have a goal to become a net generator of green energy. We currently generate about, in green methods, about 15% of the energy we consume, but we're determined to rapidly move that to more than 100%. The next goal will be to be a top 100 employer. And in some ways, this is the most important goal of all of them, because if we can't do that, if we can't earn the right to employ great staff and allow them to express themselves in the business, then we'll never achieve any of our broader goals. Moving on, we have set out on what we think is the biggest restoration programme ever attempted in Europe. We will invest more than £40 million in restoring Blenheim over the next 10 years. And to support that thereafter, we aim to build an endowment fund of more than £45 million to ensure that no future Duke ever has to worry about the money to put the roof on. Now, this sounds self-serving, but of course, Blenheim Palace is such a large economic pillar for the area that in doing so, what we're trying to do is guarantee the economic vitality of this area and the employment scene going forward. We'd also like to bring back some of the old collection. I think for 300 years, Blenheim was a selling and a shrinking estate on the whole, and we're very determined to mark that change. We've already done it in terms of property. We've been building at a big pace over the last 10 years, but we also want to mark it by bringing back some of the old artwork and the collections that we've lost, even if they're just loaned. We want to double our charitable contribution to the area over the next 10 years. That's very, very important to us. And I think that as a collection is a set of goals that covers all of our businesses, but they all point back, each one of them, to that initial vision, which is we want to be the economic lifeblood of the area, we want to enhance the lives of local people, and we want to share and protect this extraordinary place. That's a very good question. There's part of me that feels like an imposter. That's probably true of most of the jobs I've done. When you're surrounded by incredibly talented people, and when you follow the mantra of surround yourself with people who are better than you, it's difficult not to start to feel something of an inferiority complex. When I accepted the job offer to become the CEO, and I gave it 3 days hard thought because I wasn't totally convinced I was the right person for our trustees, I wrote them a note which said something like, I'm not John. John was a wonderful ambassador, an operational leader. I'm more of a back office geek. And I probably will try to do things that way. And I've quickly learned a lesson that you can't. As a leader, you do have to stand up front. You do have to be an ambassador. And if you don't, then I think people are a little bit suspicious. In terms of my 3 tips, I think the first thing I'd say, and to coin a phrase from a very well-known book, start with why. We spent a lot of time self-diagnosing and imagining what the future of this state might be and what could be important about it. And that's where we came up with this vision of enhancing the lives of local people, of being the lifeblood of the local economy. Once you've articulated a very clear explanation of why you're going to do stuff, then we found that people really rally behind you, both inside and outside the organisation. And the big decisions you then have to make as to how you go about it become much, much easier because everyone's on the same page. So for us, starting with why was probably the most important tip we picked up, and we're very glad we started there as well. Our second tip, I think, despite the fact I've discovered I have to talk a lot, I still put listening and reflection down as one of the most important attributes, and people around me tell me that I'm good at that. I'm not so sure I see it that way. We are surrounded by immensely talented people, and especially at a place like Blenheim, people who care very deeply about the organisation and its community. And I've discovered over even 6 or 7 months, a lot of the answers to the questions I have about where we go and how we do it are in the heads of people around me here. So if I can actually shut up for long enough and listen to what people are saying and reflect on it, then I probably won't go far wrong. So that would be my second tip. My third tip, that's a tough one. I've spent a lot of time agonizing about the way I communicate. As I say, I start off as a shy person. Edit that one out. As I say, I start off as a shy person, not really wanting to stand up in front of people. I'm certainly more of a writer than I am a speaker. But I quickly discovered just how important it was to people around me that I did stand up and articulate a very compelling case and get people excited and be a bit of a salesman too. We do quarterly presentations to all the teams here, and I'll speak. I mean, most recently I spoke for nearly an hour to each team. If they knew just how long I rehearse those two, how often I replay the words and the pauses in my head, so that I strike what I hope is exactly the right note, and make it clear to each of them that each of these presentations is my most important presentation, and I'm desperate to get it right, then I think they would all laugh at how long that process takes. But I realised just how rewarding that is and how much value you get back when people see you're going to make an effort. So those would be my 3 tips. Start with why, listening and reflection, and the power of really well-crafted communication. It would be remiss not to start with Winston Churchill, our greatest war leader, born here. And what I particularly admired about Sir Winston were 2 things. The first is this communication point. He wasn't really a very natural communicator, yet when you think back through the truly great motivational leadership speeches of the 20th century, they're all by Churchill. Some of the most amazing turns of phrase. He clearly spent a huge amount of effort on every last nuance of what he said, and he knew the importance of delivering it well. And I cannot think of any speaker who does it with such impact. He also was, if you read the histories of World War II, an amazingly broad planner. He was simultaneously planning for wars on 3 or 4 fronts, for secret resistance warfare, for new radical weaponry, for the political solution that would follow a war, and doing it all simultaneously. And I can't help but admire all of that. And I'd probably follow him, to stick with the Blenheim theme, with John Churchill, the first Duke, who changed the face of Europe by simply changing the rules of the game. He didn't have a superior army. The French armies of Louis XIV were undefeated in an era. But John changed the rules of the game. He changed the way his armies moved. They crossed Europe in record time by changing the way they, instead of raping and pillaging their way across Europe, which is quite tiring, sending scouts ahead with gold to buy food and lodging. So his soldiers marched, were fed warm meals, woke up at 3 a.m., were given a warm breakfast, and they marched in the cold of the morning instead of the heat of the afternoon. He crossed Europe in record time and destroyed the French armies. If they'd been expecting him in that time, it could have been a very different battle. So I think John rightly belongs up there with Winston as a key member of the Dream Blenheim Advisory Board. There's a local guy I rate very highly too, a very dear friend of mine called Mike Jennings, who runs the Jennings Business Parks. And he, in quite a small number of meetings, taught me a huge amount about the concept of servant leadership, that the leaders don't sort of demand from their people, but they actually serve their people and enable them to perform. And Mike runs an amazing business serving all of his tenants and all the businesses starting up in his parks. And it runs right through the way he runs that organisation. He and Paul and the rest of the team are brilliant. And so I think there's a huge amount to admire from Mike and Paul at Jennings. Number 4, I think Simon Sinek is an author I've read a lot of. He's the one who originally coined the idea of starting with why, and his vision for how a business had to start with a core idea, an explanation of everything they do, was very, very powerful. And when we saw how we could apply it to Blenheim, that was an elating moment where things just caught fire for us. And I think he's such a radically different thinker. I would want him on the board. Ditto someone like John Speedon Lewis, founder of John Lewis, who came up with a wholly different way of building a business, of sharing ownership with all the stakeholders, of planning for the very long term. And he did that in an era in which corporate enterprise was now firmly established. You were seeing the roots of communism, which was seen as evil, but he was brave enough to stand up and say, no, I have a middle path, and I can see very clearly that vision. And it's a vision that was clearly very powerful, because it's grown to something quite astonishing today. Finally, on my board would be a synthesis of a number of people I meet around Woodstock at the various hostelries and eateries. What they don't know about hospitality and a welcoming community isn't worth knowing. And I speak of the team at the Star, Becky and Naomi, who greet everyone, of the team at Hampers, who, Wayne, Jane and Gina, who make everyone feel completely at home from the moment they walk through the door, and Kasia and Xenia, who run the coffee shops. Woodstock is such a welcoming place, and we sit here wondering how we could emulate Disney and the quality of welcome they give, and I have a feeling the answer is actually much, much closer at home.